Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Who has the edge when it comes to success? Today, Brian Buffini will help us decide. Brian, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Now, Brian, you are the author of a book called The Immigrant Edge. But as I look at the title, did you misspell immigrant?
Yeah.
Because it spells, for our audience who obviously can't see what I'm looking at, it's spelled Emigrant. How come?
Well, there you go. In fact, that was about a 7-month-long negotiation between me and Simon & Schuster also. They just it seemed like that's not a real word. So the word immigrant is very familiar to Americans. It's a hot topic politically. It's obviously a huge part of the DNA of the country. But from where I come from, the word we're most familiar with is emigrant. An emigrant, with the letter E, is a person who leaves their home to permanently settle in another place. So for 150 years, for example, Ireland's number one export was its people. So Ireland is very familiar with emigration and not as familiar with immigration. So in June 4th, 1986, I was both an emigrant and an immigrant on the same day. But the reason for the book, The Immigrant Edge, is that there is so much to be learned from people who leave everything behind to then go pursue success. Leave everyone you know, everything you know, the culture you know, the language you know, the habits you know, the comfort zone that you have, to go and pursue a better life or a better opportunity somewhere else. And so there's something that we can very much. I'm obviously one of these people myself, but there is a tremendous amount of research and data and anecdotal evidence of people who've come to this country from another place and gone on to become hugely successful. And there's these common traits that these people possess when they go on to become successful that I think is helpful. And ultimately, you have a show that's helping people to become more successful. So it was a good fit for me to be here today.
Now, let me ask you, Brian, just give us a touch of your background, because I think I remember from reading the book, you came here with about $200. Am I correct?
$92.
92. Okay.
I
less
had
than
100. That. I had 100 when I got on the plane. I had an Uncle Jimmy who sponsored me to get my green card. And he lived in Belrose, Queens, New York. I met him at John F. Kennedy Airport with my cousin Polly, and we had a couple of beers, and I bought the beers. So the truth is, I know exactly how much I had. I had 100, but by the time we left Kennedy, I had $92. So came to the States with $92, everything I owned in a backpack, and did what immigrants do. I sold T-shirts at the beach. I did all kinds of different things, working there in California. And shortly after I was here in the States, I got into a very serious motorcycle accident. That was my mode of transportation. I was in and out of hospital for 2 years, owed over $250,000 in bills, and then just kind of tapped into some principles and some how-tos that I had been taught and that I learned when I came to the States. I eventually got into real estate. I was debt-free in 3 years. I was a millionaire by the time I was 26. And within 3 years after that, I've been asked to share what I did and how I did with other entrepreneurs. And so 22 years ago, we started Buffini and Company. And we've now trained 3 million businesses in 37 countries. And we have 20,000 small businesses we coach on a daily basis. So there it is. There's my life story in a minute.
Well, I thank you for making it so concise. But you really, to show our audience, you've been there. You've lived that life of an immigrant. You've lived the life of success and also struggle at the beginning, because I think you said 13 surgeries, $250,000. I remember in your book you were like timid about even opening mail because you were getting so many bills. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yes, I rented a room in a little cottage, 1940s kind of World War II cottage, and it had this big mantelpiece, wooden mantelpiece. And when the bills came in, I would put them in the back, sitting on the mantelpiece. And when they fell off the front of the mantelpiece, that's when I opened them and read them. I still didn't have money to pay them, but that was my system. But no, I mean, it's obviously you come here and there's a lot of struggle and a lot of strife, no matter what your situation. Mine was I got hit by a car. But some people come here and they don't speak the language or they don't know the culture, and there's a lot to learn. But ultimately, the 13% of the population are immigrants, but 26% of small business owners are immigrants. 40% of the Fortune 500 companies were founded by a first-generation immigrant. So people are coming here in situations like myself, coming to a better place, coming to this great country, seeing the opportunity, then take advantage of it. And so one of the reasons, Bill, I wrote the book, I've been here a long time. A lot of people write a book and then go out in the circuit. I've been out in the circuit for 22 years, and then I wrote a book. And the reason is I read a report from the Harvard Institute of Politics that said 50% of millennials no longer believe the American dream's possible. And 50% of baby boomers don't think their kids will have as good a life or a good opportunity as they had. And I thought to myself, that's not what I'm witnessing. That's not what I'm experiencing. And I'm going to put out some counterpoints and some principles that would really help some folks if they want to be successful and want to improve their life, that you could learn from these folks like myself that came here with nothing, who went on to become hugely successful, and see the traits that are common to them over and over and over and over again of these most successful people. And all you have to do is tap into your own DNA. I mean, look at your Horan is your name. Is from an Irish perspective, you'd be called Horan. In your DNA are people who came on a boat, left everything they know, and came here. And looking at your opportunity today and what you're doing on the radio. I mean, that's all you're hoping for. And so everybody can tap into their own DNA, their own ancestry, and understand.
And I think we all have those relatives, Brian, looking back, that came here and they either opened up a paint shop, or they worked on the railroad, or they joined the police force, or they were a tailor or a baker or the shoemaker or something. And that's how this generation became so fortunate today and enjoying a life that they had to work 7 days a week, probably 12 hours a day for.
Right. And Bill, my mother calls me the hive of useless information. But the number one hobby in America for 150 years was gardening, and it just got supplanted last year by ancestry research. The number one search on the internet since the World Wide Web became public was pornography. It no longer is. It's ancestry research. People are trying to find their roots and where they came from and where their people came from. And what I'm trying to do is say, hey, tap into that, learn where you came from, but learn the story and learn the traits that these folks who left everything to come and pursue a better life. Because here's the ultimate thing. If a person wants to be successful, they have to leave their existing comfort zone. They have to leave what they know and maybe even a little bit of who they know to go and pursue the success that's out there for them. And so tapping into that immigrant spirit that's in their own family, that's in their own DNA, along with a few principles and traits I laid out in the book, I felt would be timely for people. And, we launched the book just 2 months ago, and we've been 2 months on the New York Times bestseller. It seems to have struck a huge chord for people, and so we're very happy about that, and it seems to be helping some folks out.
Brian, with that lead in, I want our audience to know that in case they missed it early in the show, our guest today is Brian Buffini, Buffini. His book is The Emigrant, Emigrant Edge. And Brian, we're going to ask you where we can get the book and if there's a website where we can find out more.
Well, anywhere great books are sold is where you'll find the book. It's everywhere and anywhere. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, you name it, it's there. The website, and there's lots of resources and free materials we give out to people all the time. They can just put my name in. It's a good place to start, at brianbuffini.com. Buffini and Company is our corporation that coaches all these businesses and whatever else. But if they type in brianbuffini.com, they'll find me, they'll find our podcast, they'll find all that stuff that we do, and a lot of resources we give away to help people out. America has been very, very good to me, and this is my chance to give back, and it's been a real blessing.
And Brian, I want our audience to know that, as I told you before the show, I just used your book as a basis of a talk that I gave this morning. And of course, I gave you credit for it. I didn't steal your ideas. I said, this gentleman wrote a book. It's all in here. And after I talked about some of the ideas in your book and some of the topics and the anecdotes, people were coming up to me and saying, let me get the name of that book. And how do you spell that fellow's name? And of course, I pointed out, I said, don't ask for the immigrant, I-M. Ask for the E-M, Emigrant Edge, because that's the title of the book. But the audience was already very interested, and I say to our audience, if you're looking to make some changes, if you have to take action, if you want to be successful, you have to take that first step. Brian has laid it all out for you. He came here with $200, got the down down to 192 because he had a few beers when he got off the plane. And he's going to tell you more. But if he could do it, there's no reason why you can't pick up a lot of the pieces and follow his direction. Now, you mentioned in the book something about a fish discovers water last. What has that got to do with success?
Well, when you're living in America, you're living in the land of opportunity. And the phrase says fish discovers water last because the fish is surrounded by water. And when you're surrounded by water and living in water and all you know is water, the fish is the last person to see the water. And I've made it my mission in the last 30 years to kind of remind Americans how great America is. And, and it's hard. If you watch the social media and listen to the news and everybody's divided and all this, I mean, here's the thing. I travel around. I do seminars are not as big a part of what I do anymore, but I still see a couple 100,000 people a year in live events. And it's a remarkable place with remarkable opportunities. I personally believe there'll be 5 times the number of millionaires in the next 50 years than there were in the last 50 years. There's more capital. There's more access to capital. The markets are so much bigger, so much grander. And if you have an idea and a concept, whatever, you can still make it go in America. And you don't have to discover Google. Sergey Brin did that, and he was an immigrant. You don't have to discover Microsoft. The current CEO of Microsoft, he's an immigrant, came here on a visa. The fact is, you can build a great paint shop still. You can build a great bakery now. You can still build a local coffee shop and build yourself a great life and build your family a great life. And so if I can, Bill, I'd love to share a couple of the principles. I always like to provide some value to people. If I can, I know you're an educator and a teacher by heart, and so I'd love if I can just share a couple of the principles in the book that might help somebody.
Sure. No, we wanted to hear that from you, and you're the expert, so start to tell us.
Great. So the first thing I talk about in the book is having a voracious openness to learn. And, I didn't become a good student until I left school. That's the truth of it. And so there was a man named Jim Rohn I heard in a seminar years ago, and he said, if you work harder on yourself than you do on your job, you go from making a living to making a fortune. And so what are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you watching? What's your mental diet? What are you putting inside? When you're an immigrant, you have to learn. Like, a true story, Bill, you get a kick out of this. I was selling real estate as a young realtor, just getting going. I'm showing this house, and normally I was selling these little $250,000 houses. I'm showing this $4 million house. This is 25, 30 years ago. And I'm walking through the house, and I'm nervous. It's a $4 million house, probably $15 million today. And I open up the sliding glass doors, and I look at the people in the eye. They were from New York, actually. And I say, now in the backyard, we have 37 guacamole trees. Now, you ever been in a conversation where you know something went wrong, but you're not quite sure what happened?
Absolutely.
These people are looking at me sideways. I'm selling a $4 million house, and I'm talking about guacamole trees. Now, it cost me a $120,000 commission to learn the word avocado. So here's... It turns out, avocado wasn't a big deal in Ireland at the time. But in San Diego, there's a lot of avocados.
Now, I remember, Brian, I just want to interrupt you a little bit, and I give you a lot of credit for this. As a real estate agent, you were saying that you basically drove a car that I think almost collapsed or did collapse as it drove. I mean, it was in such bad shape, right?
My first car was a loaner car, where it was a teenage, call it Deadhead mobile. There was the band, the Grateful Dead, and it had a bungee cord that kept the door on. And so door to door was the bungee cord. And my first appointment, that's what I went on. And here's the thing, Bill. This is what I'm so fired about. I did my first appointment in a Grateful Dead station wagon with the door falling off. I had bills that I couldn't pay, so I wouldn't answer the phone. I didn't know what a guacamole tree is. I spent the last 16 years traveling to events on a Learjet. This is still the greatest country in the world. There is opportunity awash in this country. A fish does discover water last. When you come from a place where the opportunities aren't as rich, and you come to America, all you see is opportunities everywhere. So part of this whole thing is for folks to wake up, forget the news, forget the social media, and realize that all the success and all the opportunity they ever wanted is right underneath their feet, right in front of their nose. Just got to open your eyes and see it.
Brian,
maybe if you have that fresh perspective will do it for you.
Before we go further, and I want to hear more of your tips because they're great in your book, and I love your anecdotes. At this point in the show, we like to remind our listeners that you're listening to The Secrets of Success. My name is Bill Horan. The show is produced at the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. We'll be right back after this brief intermission.
90.3 WHPC reminds you that this year,